All right, here we are. I'm hoping you guys can hear me. That's the first thing I want to know for sure. Let me just do this, and let's do this. Good Abend, Andrew. It says here from Stelio. Hi, great to see you. Thanks for joining in. Hoping the sound is clear. I've been working on that a little bit. That's good. Thanks, Stelio. I appreciate. Um, all right. So this is sort of a fun subject. Really looking forward to talking about this today. Hi, Angelica. Great to see you too. And nice to see everyone who's in here. I can't see everyone who shows up here, so if you make a comment, I know you're here. All right. So this subject is interesting because it's about the subject paint. And of course, you know, uh, it's hard to know sometimes just what you want to paint. I get this question all the time from my students, what should I paint? What shall I paint? And there's no real easy answer to that. I mean, it really depends a lot on what you like, I suppose. Do you like landscapes? Do you like still lives? Do you like flowers and trees? Do you like to paint people? So this is kind of fun because I run into this this problem sometimes myself. What do I want to paint? I mean, you can paint anything you want, really. I mean, you can just go onto Google Images. You can find something that looks interesting. Maybe some place in the world that looks interesting. Go down to Street View, on Google Earth. Or Google Maps, and you can paint canals, you can paint oceans and mountains and all of these things. But there is one key element, I believe, in making a decision about what you should paint, and that is something that actually resonates with you. So something that, when you look at the image, it makes you feel something. So maybe it makes you feel sad. Maybe it makes you feel joyful. Maybe it makes you feel calm. Um, the feeling that you have about the subject that you're painting will definitely influence how well your painting goes. I've seen some drawing that's not so great, some color that's not so great. I've seen lots of artists do things that are kind of awkward and odd in some ways, but more important than all of those things is the feeling that you have when you're painting. So, where does that come from? So we have a life of experience here. Um, it's it's a subtext. Our life is an accumulation of life's experiences from our childhood all the way up into our adulthood. And how we see life changes from day to day because different circumstances affect us. On one day, you can hear a piece of music that really inspires you. You get goosebumps, you get chills. And the same music on another day just doesn't do anything for you. It's just strange that we are that way. Our moods change. When you're hungry, you see food differently. You smell food, because you're hungry. And if you hear a sound that you haven't heard for a long time, that's something that comes to you. It brings back memories. It sparks something inside of us. And if it's a strange sound that we've never heard in our lives before, we're probably going to pay attention to it. There are certain sounds like screeching of tires, for example, or children screaming or crying. Those things get our attention. So when we're painting, what are we interested in? Are we interested in the colors? Are there certain colors that we love that they appeal to us somehow or other? Are there certain shapes that appeal to us? One of the things I've always loved to do over the years is to draw and paint people, because everyone's different, and they're very challenging to paint. Especially portraits, I find are extremely difficult, and challenging, but also really rewarding when you can do it well. Um, I've been to so many like nude life drawing classes over the years, like hundreds of hours if I were to add it all up, drawing the figure, the human figure, and that has always appealed to me, because we look at each other, we look at ourselves, we look at each other, we relate to the figure, we understand ourselves in a sense by looking at other people, and we kind of, other people are like a mirror to us in a sense. So it's really a huge subject. How do you possibly pick a subject to paint? So I'm going to make a couple of recommendations. Before I do that, I'm going to say hi to Anne. Thanks for joining. This is great. From Amsterdam, this is so super. I appreciate when you check in here and let us know you're here. Let us know where you're from. That's just great. I don't always get to everybody, but I will try. So one of the things that I like to do, sometimes, I'm just sitting on my iPad and I'm just, watching the news, or maybe I'm, checking out a place to travel to, and I'll see an image that inspires me. Maybe I'm looking at other artists' works, and I do that a lot. I look at other artists' works. Some artists don't believe in doing that. They think, well, you shouldn't be influenced by other artists, and I kind of think that's ridiculous, because if you weren't influenced by other artists, then you probably wouldn't take up a paintbrush and do something. I mean, how do we learn how to do this except by seeing other artists' works? So um, when I'm sort of um, checking out things online, or reading a book, sometimes an image will come to me. But usually when I'm on my iPad and I'm looking at different images, I see something that captures my attention. I don't know why exactly. I'm not really sure, but something, speaks to me. I like the image. I like the shapes. I like the colors. I like what's going on. I like the movement of it. I like the perspective of it. Something has caught my eye. So I take a screenshot. I just take a photo of it from my iPad, and I put that into a file on my iPad. So I keep files on different artists. I keep files on different subjects. I keep files on things like trees or landscapes, or sunsets, or whatever catches my eye. I try and put that into some kind of order, and I have a file that I call potential paintings. So out of all of those images, now and then I'll go back through them and ask myself, well, what spoke to me? Why was I interested in that? Um, and I'll look at the photo and try and figure out what it was that was speaking to me. And I'll put that into my potential painting file if I feel like I think I could make a painting out of this. I don't mean copying necessarily, although you can do that. You can copy a photograph if you want, but we're not trying to be photographers, we're trying to be painters. So the photography that you look at should inspire you in some way, and you can change it. You can make it better, really, or maybe just really different and better as a painting. So, okay, I'm just going to say hi to Rita. Great to see you here. Ina, great to see you. And Stelio, yes, I mean inspiration. Um, what inspires you? So one of the things that I found, this is something I'm sure many of you have done. You go into an art class, or you'll find a teacher that you like. You go into a setting and you're all set up and you have your pencils or your paints or whatever you have, your charcoal, and looking at what's in front of you, you're forced to focus, and you try and find the elements of beauty, the things that are in front of you, or maybe the elements that are disturbing. Things don't always have to be beautiful. And when I say beautiful, I mean in the tradition of beauty, you know, like, I don't know, children playing in the waves, on the edge of the beach, and mom and an umbrella, and, maybe a picnic basket. I mean, all of these subjects have been covered many, many times, and it's not to say you shouldn't do it. I mean, if you look at Joaquin Soroya's work, this is a guy who covered those kinds of subjects brilliantly, and his paintings are absolutely phenomenal. Um, so you don't have to paint pretty scenes to make something that's memorable or beautiful or has some impact. And I think when you're painting, you should be looking into yourself and asking yourself continually, what is it about this that caught my eye? What am I interested in? Is it all of it? Or is it a part of it? And sometimes it's just a part of it, a small part of it, that really gets your attention. It's like, wow, I like the way that line meets that other line. And I like the way there's a soft edge here and a hard edge there, and there's a crisp color, or the way the light is hitting an object. So those are things to look for. Yes, it's a great thing to have a sketchbook with you. It's a fabulous thing. Always, if you can, always carry a sketchbook somehow. It doesn't have to be a big one, just a little one in your pocket or your bag, with a pen, maybe a pencil, and just record the things that are interesting to you. Sitting in a cafe, there's all kinds of stuff going on around. I was very much inspired by the cafes in Vienna when we lived there. As those of you who know my work, just really loved watching the people and trying to figure out why those shapes are interesting. What's going on, with the light coming through the window. So the subject to paint, that's one thing that I wanted to talk about was the subject. But the other thing I wanted to mention, because there's something that I run into a lot with artists, and that is painter's block. You hear of writer's block, but it's like, I don't know what to do. I actually don't know what to do. So when you don't know what to do, the best thing that you can do is pick up a canvas and some paint, doesn't matter what color, and just start to put something on the canvas. Just put some paint down. Whenever we activate ourselves this way, whenever we pick up a brush, whenever we, squeeze paint out onto a palette, something happens. We activate our mind. We put ourselves into a frame of thinking about what it is we're doing. And if you just want to move paint around, that's okay. You may end up with an abstract painting that's very beautiful. Maybe you just want to mix a few nice colors. That's fun to do. Some of the students that I teach color to, they go crazy making color charts. And making color charts is a lot of fun. And you can take a color chart and use just one color chart in an entire painting. So creativity, this idea of what to paint, creativity comes from limitation. The problem is we have too many choices. So it's great to be inspired. You may have 100 photos that you really love, but then you need to give yourself an exercise. You have to limit yourself in some way. And when I say that, maybe it's the format that you use. Is it a square? Is it a rectangle? Is it small? Is it larger? Maybe I just want to use 2 colors. Maybe I want to use 3 colors. When you give yourself exercises to work on, can I actually do a painting with 2 colors and make it look like something beautiful, something graphic, maybe something like a poster? Give yourself an exercise. Look at the artist's works that you really like a lot, and figure out what it is about their work that catches your eye. Because when it catches your eye and when it speaks to you, it means there's a part of you that is able or capable, it's my belief, that you are capable of doing those kinds of things in your way. So something in someone else's work can really speak to you, and appeal to you. And really honestly, there have been half a dozen artists in my life, and I just look at them and I still am inspired by them. I've mentioned Bernie Fuchs in the past, and of course Joaquin Sorolla and Sargent, Rembrandt. I mean, you look at these guys and it just fills me with wonder when I see what they do. and what they've done. So what is it about that? Is it their sense of light? Is it, and really everything that we do is about light. That's a good subject to study just on its own. What is light doing? Can I do something in a very light situation? Can I do something in a very dark situation and still pull it off and make it look right? So it's the other thing is that, when you start out, are you trying to make a masterpiece? Is that what you're trying to do? Or are you trying to learn? Now, in theory, on your way to making a masterpiece, maybe you'll learn. But maybe your paintings should be studies. Maybe they shouldn't be finished works all the time. What is a finished work? That's a question that we could spend a whole day talking about that. Just get your paint out, give yourself a limitation of 2 or 3 colors and see what you can do with that and make a study. Study the way the light is falling and the shadows. Can you make that believable? Or can you make it abstract? Give yourself some problems to solve. And when you've solved it once, solve it 3 times. So do the same painting 3 times, 4 times. There's a great exercise that I give my students, and it's fabulous. If you want to work on your paint skills and you want to sort of edit things down so you're not getting all fussy and fiddly, there's a fabulous exercise where you take a subject, not too complicated a subject, you paint that in 1 hour, just 1 hour. Give yourself 1 hour only. And then take a little break, 5-minute break, and then paint the same painting again, the same subject again in 30 minutes. And so, 30 minutes doesn't sound very long. But when you've painted it for an hour, you know the subject better. So you know the colors you need to use. And so you actually can do that. It's possible. And then the next challenge is to give yourself a little break and paint it in 15 minutes. And that is an amazing exercise because it forces you to edit all the things that you know already about the image down to its bare bones, to its simplicity. Keep it really, really simple. And whenever I've done this, it's always interesting to me to see the paintings. Typically, my students end up doing the best paintings are either the second one or the third one. It's either 30 minutes or 15 minutes. If you do a 15-minute one and you need to put in like another 5 minutes to make it better, then you do that. That's okay. But paint the same subject 3 times or 4 times. Give yourself that challenge and see how that works. And that's going to get you past this kind of block. It just really limit yourself. If you limit yourself, give yourself an exercise, then you're going to find that you can do all kinds of things you'd never thought of before. If you see another artist's work, you like their colors, use their color scheme and paint something different than they did. So that's my recommendation. I hope that's helpful. Keep files on the things that interest you. Keep them in a file, in your photo files. Look at them. Try and figure out if there's a theme that is speaking to you in those things. And sometimes I look at photos that I put into a file and I don't even know why I put them there. They inspired me maybe in one day and another day they don't. But if you keep enough of these things, you'll start to see a theme run through the stuff that you like and the stuff that you collect. And in that is a part of you. There's a language in those images that's speaking to you, and that's something that you can work towards yourself. So anyhow, I'm going to do something today. This is going to be fairly quick and fairly random. I have an image in front of me. You can't see it. I'm not going to even show it to you. It's actually a little scene from Weitra, and this is in Austria. And there was a little canal and some trees and buildings in the background. And I'm going to attempt to create something impressionistic. And it'll be fairly loose, and I have no idea how this is going to turn out. This is what I would call a study or an exercise, If it turns out well, I'm really happy, and if it doesn't, I've done the exercise and I learn every time I do a painting. And so it is for you. So I'm going to take you to the screen here. Let's just pin this, well, I'll just do it like this so I can chat on the side here. This is just leftover paint. That's all this is from other paintings that I've done. And if you've been watching my live streams, you know that I do this regularly. I just take my leftover paint and put it on a board so that I'm not wasting it. And sometimes it ends up with nice abstract shapes. And I just picked this board because I thought maybe it'll work with the scene that I want to paint. I have pre-mixed a number of colors. I'm going to show you the kind of colors that I want to work with. And these are coming from, you know, a fairly limited palette: alizarin crimson, cobalt blue, manganese blue. I've got some cadmium red in here, and I have a light yellow. But you can see these are the kind of colors that I want to work with. And I've pre-mixed them ahead of time. I like doing this because it gives me, it kind of forces me to work with that limited palette. There's a good range, but it's limited in a sense, and they're all harmonious colors. There's the tiniest bit of alizarin crimson and cadmium red in all of those colors. So the first thing I want to do is just draw roughly what I'm hoping to paint. I'm looking at a square image, but I'm going to try and paint it in a rectangular format. And I'm just going to lightly draw where I think I want this composition to go. I'm just using vine charcoal here in a holder. And I can erase that easily also off of this if I want to. But if I draw lightly and just get a sense of where I want this thing to go, I'm just going to try and create something that has some sweep, brings my eye into the painting. And there's like this little canal that I'm looking at. And again, you can't see it. Maybe I'll show it to you later if I remember. And I just want to have these big shapes that I see that create an interesting composition. I'm thinking about thirds or quarters. What I'm doing from here is the upper quarter is what I'm kind of interested in for detail. All these other areas are kind of large areas that lead up to that. There's a section here that has some trees in here, some shrubs, some bushes. There are a couple of trees that come out of the top of this thing. And there's a big mass of color in behind here. And the shapes that are in this area right here are darker. I like to put some of this stuff in color as opposed to drawing it all in. I don't want to get too fussy about it. There is an interesting little building right here. And I'm just going to put in where the darkness of that building is with my charcoal. And there's a little roof right in here and a couple of windows. And there's another building behind it, has a kind of a warm color roof. I like that. And there's kind of well, there are a few other buildings back here and roof lines. And then there's what looks like a church steeple. So I'm just going to put this little church steeple in. And again, none of this has to stay, by the way. I'm just putting something in at this stage that maybe will stay. Maybe it won't. I can decide that while I'm painting. Again, trying to create a painting, not trying to create a photograph. That's something I really want to think about. There's some more trees over here. There's a section of light that comes in around this area here. And that's really about all I need to do at this stage, just to give myself a sense of where I'm going. If you want sometimes just to divide your paintings down into shapes to work with first, and you can look at the golden mean or phi 1.613. You can look that up. And another guy that you can look up is Alphonse Mucha's work. And he designed a system of measuring where you have, if I was going to divide this down into sections, I would I would break this into 3 sections. I would take 2/3 of that section, and I would then find 2/3 of the next section here, and then I would find 2/3 of the next section over here. It's kind of like how our fingers work. I don't know if you know this, but if you take from this knuckle to this bone right here, this distance here between this joint and this one here is roughly 2/3 of the distance between those two. And the same thing happens with your finger down here at the end of your finger. This is roughly 2/3 the distance of this area between that joint and that joint. So nature sometimes gives us these things to follow. Okay, Stilio, yeah, a good exercise for painting is a picture you want to paint, like very small. Paint only what you're able to see. Squinting down, really looking at the basic elements, and trying to put in it as simply as you possibly can. I'm going to put just a few marks here that are a little bit darker so that I have something to follow. As you can see, I still have not resolved this problem of my phone cutting out, and I don't know why it's doing this. So I'm hoping we're back again and we're okay. 1 to 618. You're right, Stilio. It wasn't 613. 1.618. That's it. All right. Hopefully you can hear me again. Sorry, I don't know why my phone keeps cutting out. I thought I'd resolved it. Anyhow, I'm not going to make excuses. I'm just going to get on with painting here. Remember to touch my phone now and then so that it stays alive. I think that's what I have to do. There must be some kind of timer issue on this thing. All right, so I'm just going to take a darker color here, and I want to bring in with a smaller brush. I just want to get some kind of color going in here, and I'm putting this in a fairly transparent way. I'm keeping my darks transparent, which is kind of the tradition. Keep your darks transparent and your lights more opaque. And again, this is kind of like a little stream that happens up through here. By the time I'm done with all these colors that I have, it's not going to look, I'll have covered a lot of this up, but I might let a couple of these little colors pop through. That's okay. Don't mind doing that. All right. Just going to grab a little more here. Again, I just want to get my drawing working somewhat without getting too fussy about it. And I'll go in this a little bolder later when I know where I want things to be. I'm going to have a little bit of a dark area that comes in underneath these trees right over here. And I want to get this house working over here. And maybe a couple of spots in here. And let's see if this is going to work. Okay. I really also like painting a lot with a brush that's too big or with a palette knife. And because I have such interesting colors out here, I'm gonna start from the background. I'm gonna work to the foreground. I think that's the way I'd like to go on this. That's also something to think about when you're painting landscapes. It's always easier to paint over the things that are behind. So keep that in mind when you're painting. Always easier to paint over things than around things. So I'm just going to start putting color in. I'm going to let some of these colors that are underneath here kind of poke through. Again, very clean color that I've arranged ahead of time. I really want to keep my color nice and clean. I want an impression. I'm letting my brush strokes break up. I want each brush stroke to have its own interest, if that makes any sense. When you're putting it down, I almost want to feel as if this is, you know, my final brush strokes. I'm sure they won't be, but I'm gonna see what I can do that way. We'll try. One thing that I didn't do was actually create a sky color. Well, I have a light color here that might just work for it. Let's just see. I know that my colors have harmony because I mixed them ahead of time. So I'm going to get some of this bright in here for the sky. That's probably a little too bright. Bring in a little bit more blue. And just let that soften off there. I'm going to put some trees in here over top of this afterwards. And we'll see where this thing goes. Rita, it's interesting. It's fun to paint from your imagination or from your brain. It's a really good exercise because it kind of forces you to think about what you're doing. And it also gives you freedom. You know, the photograph can be, well, it can kind of choke you. If you're not careful, the photograph will freeze you up. When I say that, I don't mean like it frees you. It actually ties you down, ties you to the photo. And that's not always a good thing, because then we start thinking, well, you know, it doesn't look like the photo and I need to do this and I need to do that, or it's not going to look right. Well, you can have a painting that looks right without having a photo in front of you, for sure. Okay, so I'm just putting this in loosely just to get a feel right now of where that skyline might be. Always cleaning my brush, you know, trying to keep things clean or keep a variety of brushes ready. I want to get a little bit more interest into these violet areas here. So there's a sense of light that's happening without it being too fussy, just dropping the feeling that I get when I look at this. I see there's a little more intense color that happens in this area right in here. So I'm just going to drop that in over here. When I get my darks going in this area, I'm keeping the whole painting in my mind. Trying to imagine what this might look like when it's complete. So I'm trying to paint the whole thing as if I can see the whole thing in my mind, letting the brush do its thing, like without getting too hung up on everything. I want to bring in the roof line for that little building. So we keep remembering to touch my screen here so that my phone doesn't die. I want to put this little roof in here that I see. And this is where the photo is directing me a little. I'm just going to put that little roof there. Very bright. And I'm going to put a little bit of a gray underneath that, or a violet underneath that, so that it feels like there's a wall that goes in here. And maybe a little bit more over here because it carries on. And just because I can see these kind of colors back here, I'm going to put little bits of violet in behind here. Just really letting the palette knife and the shapes decide what this is going to look like. I do like these reds, but they're a little too powerful. I want to go into some bigger shapes now just to get more sense of where my focal areas are going to be. There's a lot of light hitting. There's actually snow in this scene. You can't see the scene, but there's some snow in this scene. And I'm going to bring that in with a palette knife here. Just throw that in right about there. And against that snow, there's some really nice sort of, well, violets, reds, blues. I'm going to put in some blues here and see what this looks like. Okay, already I'm starting to like where this is going. Allow your imagination to work on these things. I'm really happy to see what you guys are saying in your comments, because again, it's really important not to get hung up on doing everything from a photo in just a certain way. Like, it's just, you don't want to do that. Let the feeling that you have about the subject get involved. I want to get the sense that there are things going on behind here without getting really fussy about it. I just don't want to get too fussy. A couple of sharp edges here and there might mean there's some buildings. I can pick up a little bit of light and shadow against this house that I see in here. There's a bit of a light there, and there's a light in underneath. And really what I'm doing is just squinting and looking at the shapes. I'm not getting too fussy. I just want to get some shapes going here that feels like buildings. You can always go back and correct things later, of course. You can always go back and just, play with it till it looks right. Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to bring in a little more of the colors that I see in this area. I kind of like the way these greens are working, but in reality, they're more like like a blue-gray, if I can say that. Let's just see if I can make this work. This is a very grayed down color. So right now, it's important to have some grays working through your paintings, because otherwise, if they get too intense everywhere, if there's too much chroma or too much saturation of color, then you end up with everything getting too much attention. And, everything's fighting for attention. So allow yourself these peripheral areas. We go into a slightly darker blue in here. So we have that carrying on through this section here. Why am I doing this? Okay, because I am looking at an image, but it also feels right. That maybe that doesn't make any sense, but it feels like that's where these colors should be. If I want my eye to be led into this scene, I really want to keep this loose. Okay, I see there's a nice bright color that kind of comes through in the water in this area here. So I'm just going to drop that in. And I notice that there's a light area in the sky above that, right up in here as well. But it's a little more grayed. So, trust the values when you're working with them. Make sure the values are working. That's really important. Add the stream. Okay, and let's just do this. Sorry about that. I was pressing my phone so that it wouldn't die, and I got rid of the important color that I needed. Sorry, image that I needed there. So, okay. Now I want to get something happening in the water down in here. There's water in the stream. And it breaks up down here. I like the way it breaks up. And of course, everything's not the same color. There's some transparency in here. And it's important to have your colors breaking up and look interesting, because otherwise it looks too contrived. It doesn't feel like nature. Nature is full of broken colors and broken values. I'm going to do something even darker in here. Now you can see the great advantage in having some colors mixed ahead of time. It really makes a difference because your colors are fresh. And one of the things that happens is you get really muddy color. Hey, Andrew, it's great to see you are here. And looking forward to you watching the replay if that's what you need to do. That's great. Happy you showed up. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to bring in this kind of brown gray color here. And that's something that I see in the original image a bit. Just let that happen through here. I need a little more of that down in this area. And again, I'm just laying it in over top of other colors very loosely. I don't need to have a lot of brushwork to make this happen. I like the textures that happen from the canvas underneath this way, because it gives me a sense of, well, the textures we see in nature. Now this right side over here is pretty dark, so I'm going to go into that with some darker colors, a little thinner, maybe sort of a violet dark, and I'm just going to start dropping. It can be even darker than that. Dropping some of these colors in here, and you can see I'm just scumbling. I'm just moving the brush around a lot so that the brush does the work. Okay. That really isn't there. That shape isn't there in my image. I'm just letting it stay there because I kind of like it. And I'm going to go into a green here that I see happens that comes from my original image. In some ways, it's sometimes hard to know when to stop, because sometimes when I look at something like this, I think, well, okay, it's like really almost as far as I want it to go. Of course, it's not done, but I also want to be careful not to go too far with it. So I want to let the textures work for themselves. Let your mind figure out what's going on. I don't need to tell you the whole story, but it still has to have some resemblance to what I'm trying to do. That's for sure. Okay, again, trying to keep things simple. I keep squinting all the time, looking at where my big dark values are and looking to see where I can put the least amount and still create the effect. So that's one of my challenges today. How little can I put in and still create the effect that I want, so that it gives you, the viewer, an opportunity to resolve some things. Some of these angles are important. I want to have this angle here working so that it feels like it's turning. It's a strong line that comes up through here. So boof, boof, and it comes across. It's almost like this zigzaggy thing that's happening that creates that interest. Okay, so in this area here, I've got some trees, and I'll put a little more finesse into that area. I've got some trees that are coming away from this side here that help close off that corner. And that corner, you know, if you're not careful, your corners take your eye away from the painting, take you out of the painting. So you want to try and soften edges when you come to the edges like this. Okay, and I see another dark line over here that's important because it shows me a shoreline right there. Back there, just an indication. It's in the peripheral, but it's there. And I have more of that brown, that darker brown color going on. And it's warm. It's a warm dark brown that goes on in this section up in here. Again, I want to keep my colors quiet, my corners quiet here, so they don't take your eye out of the painting. Okay, now in the background, I want to get a little more going on here, more towards the violets and blues, pinks, those kind of colors back there, so that our eyes sets back a little bit, because right now they're getting an awful lot of attention. Those browns are getting too much attention. And at this point, I can start to bring a little bit more color into the shrub areas in here. Again, just touching my phone here so I don't lose you guys. It's a nice bright color right through there. It picks up over here. And it even picks up in a couple of spots into the foreground. There's a little more detail, a little more texture there. Now, I'm going to start to get a little more refined now, just to bring a little bit more detail in where I need to. I want that little house to stand out here. This is a focal area. This is a focal point right here. So I want that little house to work there. And when I look at it, I can see that I need to bring that roof line down just a little more. And maybe I'm going to bring that strong color that I had there before into this area too. And that becomes a little bit more dominant now. And I'm going to pick up a couple of lights that I see in the background here up against the sky. So we're really trying for this impression here. That's what we're trying to do. I'm not trying to get too detailed with all of this stuff. Keep nice, clean, pretty color if you know, you don't mind it being pretty. When I squint at it, it's looking a lot like what I see in my reference. It's okay. So far, so good. I just want to shove a little bit more of that blue in there. And maybe pick up a little more blue in a window that I see in here. And there's some nice greens that happen in this as well. So I'm going to grab some green that I mixed ahead of time and bring a little bit of that into this edge that takes our eye back. Okay. So far, so good. This phone is hanging in there, so hopefully it'll stay that way. I want to get some darker greens going. And here, as it goes back, it cools down a little bit. Now, this is really strong right there. I could like it, but for me, it's too powerful. So I really want to take that down. I'm going to take that down in strength. I'm going to just do this. It doesn't have that brightness in the original image. It doesn't have that kind of color in the original image. So there are times you do have to go to your original image and you know, look and see. What is it telling me? How am I going to get this effect and still keep it colorful? I feel like now I can afford to go back into the snow a little more. And I'm just going to pull that up over here a little more. This is an important area right here to get right. Because that takes your eye in, almost like an arrow, takes your eye into the painting. Andrew, that's a good question. Difference between focal point and vanishing point. So vanishing point is where everything leads to the horizon. So a vanishing point in this case would be at our eye level. And that could be any point where all the angles lean towards everything above your eye comes down to a vanishing point. Everything below your eye comes up to the vanishing point. But a focal point, it means it's an area that has a crispest edges, the strongest edges, the most contrast in value, and the most intensity of color. So that's how you create a focal point. Those three things will do that. Now, this might be a really interesting discussion in a future live stream, because I can discuss that to show you exactly how that works. Okay, I'm just trying to pick up to create a green here that will work for my trees. I need it to be light enough, green enough, but neutral also. So that's going to be an interesting little challenge. And what I've got going here so far is not going to work. To bring a little bit more yellow into this. You can't see what I'm mixing here, sorry. I know when Stefan's doing this, he has this all arranged so you can see what he's doing better. One of these days I'll get this sorted too. Okay, so I'm just bringing some greens in here that I see coming from a tree. Another tree here. All these subtle little colors that happen. Again, towards the edges, I don't have to have a lot of detail. It's not It's not important out towards the edges. I want your eye to keep coming into the center of this. That's the idea. I'm going to put a couple of these greens over here as well. Doesn't hurt. And now I want to bring in a little bit more, sort of directional lines that happen in the snow here. I'm not sure why it does this. I'm just looking at the image and realizing, well, it kind of does that. There's some little dark spots. And get those ones in underneath here, because this is a bit of a focal area also in here. Okay, now I'm going to bring in this little brush that I really like a lot. This is this one little cheapy brush that I got in India, but I love what this does because it gives me these nice fine lines. And I'm going to start to bring in just a little detail. It doesn't need very much to make this work, I don't think. Just let the brush again do the work. Always try to keep my paint fresh when I do this. And I'm just using, this is not a black, this is just a mix of blues and browns here. That's all it is. And I just want to build this area up a little more. This idea of branches coming in over the top of this thing. Just a little bit of detail goes a long way to making something work. It really does. You don't need to put it all in, but you have to have enough that sort of lets people know, well, you know what, there's some trees over here. That's what this is. Also notice in the distance that we've got some branches coming away from what looks like a big spruce tree. So I'm just going to put that in here as well. And I've made that a little lighter in value so that it sits back more. You don't want it too strong because then it starts to compete with the foreground, right? All right. It's starting to come along. I'm okay. I'm happy enough with this. If I've got this happening here, I've got some reflection in the water as well. And hi, Moni. Thanks for checking in. It's nice to see you here, all the way from Germany. All right, I'm going to put some serious paint in here now. When I say serious, I'm just trying to build it up a little more, that's all. Now these lights back here, they're a little too bright. So I can actually just scrape through those a little with a palette knife just to knock them down a touch. And that picks up the color, takes away that intensity. And there's the peak of looks like a church or something here. I'm just gonna, and it's blue, kind of a blue. I'm just gonna put that in and maybe a bit of white against the underside of that. And who knows what's really there, right? Like we're just right now imitating what we see with colors and shapes. That's all we're doing. I'm not trying to get too fussy with this. You can get fussy as you want later, if that's what you want to do. I want to make these shapes interesting here. That's all. Okay. And now I'm just really playing with color. I'm just putting things in that I feel might work. I'm not trying to slavishly follow any formula. That roof is really standing out. I need a little bit of a color for a chimney. right here, I'm going to put something in that looks like maybe a chimney and a little dark side to one side of that. Sometimes that's all you need to do. You don't have to have it all. And I'm also going to see if this works. I want to put a little light against this side here. Let me just put a little palette knife work against that one side right there. And maybe on the other side as well. And of course that's going to have a face to it, that building. I've got a violet that's in there right now. I'll go back to that violet, put that in. It's a lower building. Comes over this way. And you can see how this starts to build, right? I want to bring in, I'm going to bring in this brown that I have and just create a couple of trees that fall into this area right here. So just very lightly drag my brush down, letting the brush do all the work. I'm going to go into that same brown for the tree that's next to it. Pressing in a little more as it comes down because they're thicker towards the bottom. And maybe I pick up a little bit of light on one side of those trees. So I'm going to have to go and try and get the right color. I'm going to add a little lighter color on one side, maybe a bit of warmth to that color. And just put a palette knife up against it. This is where you have to be careful. Try and get it right. That's good enough for now. Good enough. All right. And just a couple more of those little dark branches in here. Again, very few details needed to make these things work. Now when I look at this, I look at it on my screen. I'm pretty happy with how this has gone. There's a lot more that I could do, but I also don't want to get too crazy about this, putting too much in. So I just want to keep it fresh, keep the eye moving back towards the background here. And if I bring in a little bit of intense color, just in a couple of spots, I don't need it much, over here, and maybe in a couple of places down in here, this is going to give me the idea of my eye coming over to this area. Our eye is drawn to chroma, to more intensity of color. And that's a really nice technique for forcing people to look around your painting. Like I can put a couple of spots over here. I don't want it could be too much. I have to be careful that I don't do too much of this. But those little points of color keep your eye moving around the painting. That's what happens. That bright yellow that I had in here, I want to pick up a couple of more spots here. So we've got a bit of light dappling through the woods here. Maybe it picks up a little on this side too. And you really don't need a whole lot more than that. Okay, so I may work on this a little bit more. I'm happy with how this is going for the most part. I don't want to take it too far. I also have to let you know that I have a meeting today, so I need to actually get to my meeting. And I may come back to this and do a little more, but not much, because I'm pretty happy with where that is right now. All right, so there we go. That's kind of, well, there it is. I'm not going to try and take this too much further. Happy to see all these little colors that are popping through. Maybe I'll do a little more work on this later, but I'm going to call it for the day. Let me come back to you. All right. Thanks everyone for showing up. I really appreciate that. If you think there's someone who might be interested in this, I'm going to be posting the finished painting and a link to YouTube. Give me a thumbs up if you like what you saw today, if you're watching on YouTube. And if you have any other questions about it, feel free to make comments. Also, either through YouTube or on Facebook, I'm happy to answer questions if I can. And I'm hoping that what we talked about today was helpful. This idea of trying to get yourself going when you're in a block and inspire yourself. Just keep track of images that excite you, or places that you have been, and places that you feel you'd like to paint. And if you can even be in a location and do something on location, then that's even better. So keep a sketchbook with you. That's always good. Limit your colors, limit your time, give yourself exercises, do studies. Do 3 or 4 of the same painting over and over again. I think it's a really good program to really improve your drawing and painting. I love doing this with my students, and I see a huge change when they do this. So stay safe. Thanks for showing up. Really appreciate you checking in on these. I never know from week to week what I'm going to do. So I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do next week. But hopefully we'll see you next Friday. Be safe and be well. See you next time. Bye-bye.